Why live a quiet life? As for today in America, more than any other place in the world, I believe we get the idea of living a quiet life very wrong, but it doesn't have to be that way. And this is what I want to talk with you about today. Greetings, everybody. I'm STEVENGAROFALO of ReasonForTruth. You know where the truth comes first and the reasons come last, but where we're always and constantly learning. Because when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. I'm here to cut through the fog of culture's distorted truth, because in our relative world, the truth doesn't change, but the human will to distort it certainly does. And I cut through that distortion of current events with the truth of God as an antidote to the false messages of this sinful world, and Lord knows there's a lot of them out there. So before we get started, make sure you do a couple of things. Knock out that subscribe button, and then just go ahead and click a little German, click to that alert bell down below. There's an article by Psychology Today by Janice Webb, and she's a PhD on the subject of childhood emotional neglect. And the article is entitled 8 Red Flags of Emotional Neglect in a Family. Now, Janice listed 3 key points. The first key point was that you don't need to grow up in a perfect family to be emotionally happy and healthy, but your family must be good enough. It's kind of vague, but I think you get the point. I always tell my friends, I said, you can't give what you don't have. I'm very blessed to have come from a very healthy family, and my mom was strong, godly, and she was as loving as she was just. And I know what this is saying. We're not called as parents to be friends. We're called to be parents. It's very unpopular today. That's number one. Number two, the second key point that she made is that the people who grew up in emotionally neglectful families, which includes lack of parental presence, right, because they're gone on travel or work, lack of parental presence, love, or lack of time, just spending time, be there. It makes sense. What happens is children often sense that something's wrong in their families, but they have no idea what it is. They can't pinpoint it. They're just kids. We want to be aware of that. And third, she says, third point or key point that Dr. Webb made is that if your family is inattentive to the feelings in general, there are things you can do to take care of that and take care of your own feelings. Now, I don't want to dwell on that, but I do want to say that I think that's good advice for many who, again, if their parents don't have something to give or they're unwilling, you're listening to this, just understand you're going to have to go to the Bible, but you're going to have to figure it out. I don't think that's what Dr. Webb was talking about, but I'm saying God is there. He's the ultimate. He's the missing father for many in the world today, and he's the missing parent, but he's also God above all things. Now, I'm not a huge fan of psychology, to be perfectly transparent with you, but coming from an Italian family that was very close and strong growing up, I am a fan of family and biblical principles and having good, strong, godly people around you to guide you as family. And I was a beneficiary of that and very thankful. Listen, I also respect, by the way, Dr. Webb's 3 core points, and they are for sure worth looking at. That being said, I want to focus on the issue from a different perspective, and that perspective is a biblical one, as I always do, right? Perspective, after all, is what we need to understand. Context, right? Psalm 139:13 makes clear that God knit us in the womb. So he created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Who knows us as intimately as God does, right? Nobody. God built us. It's like saying, we have a designer of the car. He's a chief engineer. Who knows that car better than that engineer? Nobody. God is infinite. That engineer is finite. So who can heal us better than God? There is no comparison. God is the source of all healing, love, and really what you want to say today, positive change. Okay, true positive change. I'm not talking about just thinking and so therefore it is. I'm talking about true change of heart and mind, accepting what is, and then watching God and trusting in him to take care of you and guide you. That being said, I want to shift gears and look at the life of Apostle Paul in 1 Thessalonians. So who left us a great model as to how to live a reflective life in God in light of living a more quiet biblical existence as opposed to a fast pace in a secular world in light of being married and raising children in a place that's we're just coming and going like passing ships in the night. So let's look right and see what Paul says, Apostle Paul. In addressing the church at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 11 to 12, Paul says this, and to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, you should mind your own business and work with your hands. We're going to talk about that in part 2. Work with your hands. Just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, so that you will not be dependent on anybody. 1 Thessalonians 4:11-12. Oh, my word. And we live in the United States of America. 65 to 70% of people don't pay any taxes at all. I don't know what the percentage of people on some form of government assistance. It's more than 50% now. I guess it could probably be up to 60, 65 if they're not paying taxes, I would assume. This is not biblical. Paul was telling Thessalonian church here, as well as you and I today, a few important things that we need to do in light of working hard as a reflection of God and our faith to the world. Our faith in Jesus Christ is reflected through these things. I'm not putting down, by the way, government assistance. Listen, if you need it, you need it. But how many people just don't work or really take advantage of it? Now, let's just break down exactly what God is telling us through about how to live in light of a work ethic in Paul's letter. Well, actually, I want to skip past the work ethic. I want to talk about living in more of a quiet life. But first, Paul makes clear that we are to live a quiet life, right? We're quiet lives. Now, what does it mean? What is he speaking about here? What does that have to do with work ethic, by the way? And these things do connect. Well, looking at verses 11 to 12, we find Paul summarizing his prior instructions whereby Paul exhorted the Thessalonian believers to lead a quiet life. So, again, what does this mean? Does this mean that we are not to speak, just be quiet all the time? I'm a pretty verbal guy, man. I don't think I'd cut the grid there, Are we to live under a rock hidden away? To be clear, Paul is not referring to a lack of activity or verbal speech, but rather to striving to attain an inner quietness, an inner peace, benefiting our Christian faith. That's 2 Thessalonians 3:12, 1 Timothy 2:11. Now, in the workplace, whether physically present or digitally online, we are to have a presence that exhibits God's peace. And by doing so, we're going to reflect the peace of God to a world entangled in a web of confusion, mayhem, anxiety, and craziness, which is the opposite of the peace of God. So next, God's word tells us, by the way, that you and I, and the church in general, should not be busybodies, but should mind their own business. That's what we should be doing. Usually, people are busy running other people's affairs, not really running their own too well. This leads us to number two or second. Paul tells us here in this passage that a Christian's household should be in order as a testimony to God to others. So what did Paul mean when he said this? Well, what he's saying is that if we are focused on maintaining and refining our own household according to the scriptures, we will not have time to be busybodies. We will avoid other people's business, and if for no other reason, we have no time to do so, right? We have enough time just to do. Well, how much time do we spend being busybodies versus in the Word of God? Well, I don't have time. I get up in the morning, I got to go to work, and I'm not really reading my Bible time. Well, how much time can we trade in from the busybodiness to do that? Think about that. But in light of living out God's work ethic in the marketplace, by avoiding gossiping and busybodiness, we automatically, apart from the average, we become different or apart from the average person of the world who embellishes himself in these things. Now, this gives witness to our faith in Christ, and it gains respect from our employer and from our customers and from others. There's an old saying that says, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I think if we are quiet, or we at least even in times when someone's mean to us, I deal with that all the time in business and ministry. You find that, and I've learned that the hard way years ago, is that, people will see what people are. Let them figure it out, unless it's a really bad violation and you have a special relationship and you happen to be sharing mother, son, wife, husband. That's different than just gossiping. Now, there's 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week for all of us. Now, as such, we ought to use the limited time that God has given us each day to focus on what God has given us, starting with our families. Now, I recently read a book. I'm not going to tell you the name of the book, but he was interviewing one of the most famous world evangelists who recently passed away in the last few years of cancer. And he said months before his death, he was meeting with this very well-known theologian, and he was dying of cancer. He said he'd been consumed by frenetic travel and ministry. But now he had slowed down so he could be more, and he said, introspective, more attentive to his wife, and more at peace. He said this. He says, things that didn't seem so important to me before now have taken on a whole new meaning. They become personal. I've started visualizing me seeing the great throne of God. I thought it was interesting. This man was not an idle man. He's he's very well known. He traveled the world to and fro and had a huge impact for Jesus Christ. So it's hard to argue with that. But I'm still baffled as to his conclusion at the end of the day is, were there other people that could have picked up some of that slack and allowed him to spend more time raising his wife, his children and spending time with his wife. After all, I believe that God gave him a wife and then God blessed him with children, right? So if God blessed him with children, my brother once told me something. He says, why have children if you're not going to raise them? It's a good point. This is not an idle man again. He wasn't sitting by the sidelines. No apathy there for sure. But like this man, so many other famous Christian men, our focus must be right in light of doing what God calls us to do in contrast to what we justify as what we want to do in light of building our ministry and even serving God. So at the expense of our family. In other words, plain and simple truth is that, it's never biblical for anybody to build a ministry or build a business or a career at the cost of not seeing their children grow up. I'm just saying it. You want to disagree, that's fine. God didn't call you to be some special person, didn't call me to be something that special person. There's a lot of people out there that can do the job. None of us are that special. My teacher, Dr. Norman Geisler, one of the most humble men. One thing I remember about him is he just wanted to, I don't ever remember, him getting tangled up for the pulpit. He was always gracious enough to say, if you want me to speak, I'll speak. But he really empowered a lot of other people and he educated a lot of people in how to speak rightly about the Bible. The younger generations go down for him, and he passed a few years ago, and he was in his mid-80s. But it seems like the generations that came past, our generations, and just seem to have missed the boat there a little bit more than the past generation. But anyways, the cost of raising their children, seeing them grow up while leaving their wife behind in the name of God's calling, my challenge to many big names in ministry and many little names, even my little name self, is simply, why have children if we're not going to raise them? Why get married if we're not going to nurture our wives or our husband, right? Our children. Oh my, this goes against the beliefs, certainly of America, being top dog. I really don't care if that offends anybody, including myself, but it's the truth. If you want to serve the Lord and travel the land, go to and fro and be home. Listen, don't get married. Don't have children. It's simple. We want to talk about living a quiet life that leads to some introspectiveness. And this famous evangelist, I think it's interesting that he didn't really figure that out till he was maybe 6 months within death. That it's, I think if we don't get introspective with the Lord, how can we speak on his behalf if we're not gaining that intimate time with him? It's simply selfishness or selflessness versus selfishness. Now, furthermore, we ought never to sacrifice having introspective time. That's what I'm saying here with God. Now, how can we give out what we don't take in, right? That's the simple point. But it's an easy way to do in light of God's calling and to ignore our first calling. It's very easy to do that. That's just the way life is. I think it's going to change as the world geopolitical map is changing, as all the money that's been floating around for so many decades now is about to go bye-bye. Economy is going to take, we better hang on, strap in, because it's coming. It's here, but it's about to get a lot worse. And with that, you're going to have less travel. You're going to have more people spending time with home. That will be a positive outcome of a very bad thing that is sitting on our horizon. Don't really care what the Feds say about the condition of the dollar. Janet Yellen, she is head of the Treasury Department. She's not even an economist. I have no idea. It's all political. I'm not sitting here criticizing her, but people are making policies based on politics, not reality of what is, and we're about to figure out the truth, because eventually the truth comes out 100% of the time, not most of the time. But in all of this mess, what we could do? We could have the peace of God. We certainly can, and we are going to be a witness before we even open our mouth as to the existence of Jesus Christ and the truth of the Christian faith. Paul tells us to live a quiet life, not referring again to a lack of activity, but rather an inner quietness. That's number 2. Paul says that a Christian household should be in order as a testimony to others. Well, again, make sure you subscribe, hit that alert bell. And lastly, if you want to check out our podcast or videos, we got over 600 audios. We got over 230, 40, almost 250 plus videos. But this is what I want to challenge you to. I really want you to check out our new platform. I want you to go over there, subscribe. You can check it out at StevenGarofalo at locals.com, LOCALS.com. This is going to get you to my private community. You'll have early access to my videos there, which is great, at least a day or more sooner. But more than that, you're going to get some exclusive videos that we're putting together that we're going to be addressing subjects that are not going to be on the public forum, which really you can't put on the public forum. You want to check that out. Be part of a community, and as well as you're going to be part of, we're going to start doing live streaming, Q&A, and so we're going to do a lot of neat things. Again, go check that out. Sign up. It's $5 a month. Please support me in that way, because that is what's going to allow us to keep this moving forward in a new level. Listen, thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo. This is your Reason for Truth for today.